As a new business owner, you probably run your business from home. But can you deduct the office, workshop, or studio set up in your home as an expense? What are the requirements and what are the pitfalls? In this episode, we answer these questions, so stay with us.
Welcome, dear listener. You are listening to the Business Lessons in Denmark podcast. I'm Rezső, and I'm here with Katalin Balog, the owner of Cool Accounts APS. Hi, Kati. I'm back.
Hi, Rezső. Great. Welcome back. How was your vacation?
It was good, thank you. Although we didn't go to Paris, but we spent some time in our backyard pool instead. Those few days of relaxation were just what I needed.
Wow, I'm glad to hear that. I suppose you are recharged now and ready to get back to work. What is our topic for today?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I run my business from home, and my wife and I have designated a room as an office to maintain work-life balance.
That's great. It's like you are colleagues if you work from the same office.
Yes, you are right. The idea is that we will work in this room. So there would be a desk for each of us, shares my computers, and of course, my wife's sewing machine. We actually thought of this solution because I wondered if this room, being my business office, could perhaps be deducted as an expense.
Well, it can happen that a business space set up in your home can be deducted in your business, but, and here I would underline the but with red colors, it's very rare that business owners can qualify for that because there are very strict conditions, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. If you had an APS, it's a bit of a different matter because then you invoice the rent to your APS and then the APS can deduct it as an expense.
Okay. So the APS can deduct the rent as an expense, but as a private person, I have to pay tax on this rental income, right?
Right, exactly. Just as you said. So this arrangement is not about saving taxes.
I see. And what conditions do I need to meet as a small business owner?
Whether you can deduct the cost of a business space set up in your home as a small business owner is determined by comprehensive and specific evaluation that considers several factors.
Okay, so there are several conditions to meet.
Yes. The first important factor is the character or nature of the space. Here you need to see if the furnishing, equipment, entrance arrangement, and so on have changed the nature of the space so much that it no longer integrates with the rest of the home and is not suitable for private use.
And what does it take for the nature of a space to change so much that isn't suitable for private use?
Let's take an example. If you are a carpenter and there is a shed or an outbuilding in your house that you set up as a carpentry workshop with your machines, tools, and wood materials, the nature of the space changes so much that it's no longer suitable for private use. But there have been specific cases where the tax office has accepted spaces set up as laboratories or art studios.
Well, as a photographer, a space might only change in nature if I set it up as a dark room or maybe a photo studio.
Yes, that's a very good example. But if you have designated your room as an office, it's unfortunately a difficult case. The tax office does not accept the expense deduction if the business nature of the space is only based on the presence of a desk, a computer, or a bookshelf, as this does not rule out the space from being used for private purposes.
That's interesting. It's a little bit strange because we really only intend to use that room as an office, meaning we are only there when we work, and we don't use it for private purposes at all.
Yeah, I understand. But the rule focuses on whether the space is suitable for private use, not whether it is actually used for private purposes. For example, there was a case where a room was furnished with office furniture and floor-to-ceiling shelves along the walls, and the tax office did not accept it as an office because the space had not changed its nature so much that it would have been unsuitable for private use. However, in another case, a room was specifically soundproofed and furnished with large number of musical instruments, mixing consoles, speakers, and so on. The tax office accepted this case because the nature of the space had changed so much that it was considered suitable exclusively for making music and not part of the general living areas of the home.
Okay, I see now. Well, Kati, you are not bringing me very good news today.
Yes, I know. I also have to note that the space should not have furniture in it that makes it suitable for private use. So if you set up the space as your photo studio, you can't put a bed in the corner because you sometimes use it as a guest room.
Yeah. At least not if I want to deduct the cost of the space as an expense. And you mentioned the entrance arrangements. What does it mean?
The space should not be an integral part of your home. For example, if it's a room with a separate entrance, then it is distinct from your home, and then it is not an integral part of your home.
For example, like a shed, an outbuilding, or a basement room?
Yes, those are good examples, yes. But I read an interesting case where a small business owner's business space was not accepted as an expense because she conducted activities involving receiving many clients, and there was no separate toilet for the clients. So the clients had to use the toilet of the home. As a result, the tax office considered that the business space was not separated enough from the home, and so it was an integral part of it. So it was not deductible.
Yeah, wow. I didn't think the conditions would be so strict.
Unfortunately, they are. And there is another important factor.
And what else could there be?
The extent of the work performed in the space is also an important factor. That is, whether a space is significantly used for work during normal working hours. Deducting the costs of a business space set up in your home usually assumes that the space is significantly used as the main workplace during normal working hours.
I see. And what does this mean in practice?
Let me give you another real-life example. There was a business owner who worked as a consultant in his client's office from early morning till late afternoon. He sometimes worked from home, occasionally in the evenings or at weekends, and therefore he could not deduct the cost of his home office because it was not significantly used as the main workplace during normal working hours.
The truth is, I'm often out in the field too. I'm usually at different locations during the day taking photos. I mostly work on my computer at home in the late afternoons or evenings. So this means the expense deduction won't work for me either.
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm sorry, Rezső. However, when you will have your downtown studio, you will be able to deduct its rental cost.
Yes, having the studio would be nice, but for now, upgrading my photography equipment is the first priority. So I will continue working from home, even if I cannot deduct any expense for that.
Okay. Maybe I can offer a bit of good news anyway, because you can deduct the cost of office equipment you have used to furnish the room, like the desk, reading lamp, or shelves. The only condition is that you need to split the cost based on the business and private usage ratio and only deduct the portion used for business purposes. So this relates to what we have discussed about deducting low-value assets in an earlier episode.
Well, finally you came with a good news because my new desk and chair are already on the way. And of course, I made sure to request the invoice in my company's name.
Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kati, for today's information. Unfortunately, it wasn't good news for me, but at least I know what the situation is.
Yeah, that's right. It's better to know the rules and act accordingly than to do something based on false information and then get into trouble later.
Yeah, you are right. That's true. See you next week, Kati, and have a good week.
Thank you, and the same to you.
Thank you. Today's episode was sponsored by Cool Accounts APS. If you want to take your business to the next level, then contact us through our website www.accounts.cool. And for up-to-date and useful information, follow our Facebook page. We wish you a successful week.